My name's Don.
And I'm Peter.
And we are two plebs talking about... California.
This week in the DPRC.
Oh, and it is. So, Monday we talked about California being on fire.
We did.
Right? And that's sort of a news story unto itself. By nearly any calculation, this is the worst it's been possibly ever.
Well, I think that the death toll has doubled since we last talked about it.
I think so. What was it, 22, 23, something like that?
It was 23 on Monday. It's like 40 now.
It's 48 as of this morning.
Oh, 48. Fuck me. So more than double.
Yeah. That's nice.
You know, you can go on the Twitter and see the posts of, melted vehicles who have barely escaped the blazes.
Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of stuff like that. Now, I think we're at 80,000 acre, 800,000 acre. I don't know. It's gigantic.
Huge.
Right?
Fucking huge.
Huge.
When we don't want to use that word.
And so, look, that unto itself is a story worth talking about. However, that by itself isn't exactly DPRC worthy.
No.
So why are we talking about California fires?
I have no idea.
So, we're going to go get in our Wayback Machine.
Right.
And go back and start, it depends on where you'd like to, but we could start in, say, 1970.
Okay. I think I see where this is going.
Now, right around 1970, we had, here in California, a forest clearance process that went something like this. The U.S. Forestry Service would manage the forest and go to various private logging companies in California and say, look, these trees are dying, so we're going to charge you some nominal fee to come in and cut it, and whatever you do with that is up to you.
Right.
And so, basically, we took an entire logging industry and said, cover our forest for us.
Right.
And while we were at it, they had various dead trees that they had to take out for the privilege of effectively going in and getting otherwise inaccessible lumber that they could make decent profits off of.
Right.
And so they had to take care of dead trees that were on the forest floor. While they were doing that, there was also a boatload of requirements about how they had to leave the forest floor, which is to say they couldn't leave it covered in pine needles and crap.
Right.
And other dead foliage.
So in other words, they're like, go in there and get all this lumber that you're going to make money off of, but while you're there, clean up.
Right. And so for the lumber company, this was, hey, look, we could never get that output any other way.
Right.
And so it provides us more than what we would have due to, on just our private land.
Right.
So we like making money, so go do it.
Right.
And for the state, it was, this is how we get the forest cleaned up without, having to pay boatloads of money for this.
Right.
And so, for the National Forest Service. Anyway, and this was common practice forever, up until about 1970.
Right.
Now, in 1970, we started all of this hippy-dippy save the forest crap at levels not seen in the United States ever.
Right.
And among the things we did is said that process needed to stop.
Why?
Well, because you can't trust the private corporations to go in and do things with the forest because they shit nuclear waste all over everything.
Okay.
Or something. And so we needed the government to go in and do it manually. Well, here's the deal. The Forest Service was set up under the pretense that they wouldn't be doing that, and no one went, well, let's just double your budget. Because, shockingly, that cost a lot of money. So the answer became, you now have guys that just aren't doing it, right? Or are trying, but they have no funding and no time and no help. So
they can only manage so much.
And realistically, having talked to a lot of forest rangers about very similar things, what you get is, well, look, we kind of do it, but we're not even necessarily supposed to, right? This is not technically part of our job. We all just know it's a good idea, so we do what we can, which is not much.
Right.
So
you get a few acres done per year.
Right. Maybe. Except that, I mean, really, even that doesn't matter that much, because it's not like one guy with an SUV is hauling out a dead tree. Not happening.
No.
So, we end up in this position where it starts to kind of go out the window in the 70s because we start rolling back the ability of private companies to go in there and take care of this sort of thing.
Right.
Now, this has led to an incredible division of where things burn and how bad those burns are.
Right.
Because when the national forest burns, it is a gigantic disaster. But when the private land burns around here, like, it sucks, and okay, there can be some decently large fires. Nothing like this, right?
Right.
Well, that's because we kept going after we said no more private companies, right? And a lot of that relates to a lot of the hippy-dippy crap about saving the forest that happened everywhere from 1970 to about 2000, right? With a lot of our, well, we're going to federally standardize how forests are taken care of. Because all forests everywhere are the same and have the same needs.
Right.
Now, Bush tried to get rid of that in 2007 or something like that, and got told no.
Of
There
course.
will be no individualized plans to take care of forests because they are all exactly the same.
Right.
Which,
There's
if anyone's ever been to two forests, goes, but that's not true.
Yeah, there's no such thing as separate ecosystems.
No, they don't exist. In fact, the entire surface of the planet is exactly the same everywhere, which is, I mean, that makes sense.
Right. I mean, we really need to make sure we're taking care of all those trees in the deserts.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Sahara Desert and the rainforest are, I mean, they're basically the same.
Right.
So, yeah, great plan. But once again, when you hand things over to the feds, and the feds start to talk about standardization, this is what happens.
Right.
Well, it only gets worse from here, right? Because we have gone on to have a wide variety of other problems, mostly from our own making here in California.
Yes.
And this is where we really get to the DPRC section of this. So, 2016, California was on fire.
Yep.
Shocking, really. I mean, that never happens. But as California was on fire, the state assembly and legislature, in a thing that never happens here,
Right.
unanimously, both houses,
Yes.
voted to pass a bill to take care of forest clearance and emergency funding for fires.
Oh, they did.
Unanimously.
Okay.
And by that I mean it was, I think the numbers are 75-0 and 39-0.
Okay.
Right? This is no objection. Governor Moonbeam went, nah.
He vetoed it?
Yep.
Oh.
Now, that would have done a substantial amount of things to help solve the problems we have now.
Right.
But,
and of course, that doesn't even bring into account the fact the cutting of funds to those services in the preceding years.
no, it is not.
Because I'm assuming you were getting there.
Yeah, there's more. So, we have a state emergency budget that covers these sorts of things. And it does this over time, right?
Right.
It waves a little bit. But the section relevant to covering this, right, used to be, I want to say it's $52 million, 52 and some change, $1 million. Right around the same time he vetoed this bill, he said, why don't we make it 8.5?
Now, like an article I read said like over a certain duration that like $111 million was cut out of the budget.
Well, it's hard to tell exactly because that same calculation is being performed by numerous people, and it seems to be, what are you taking into account?
Gotcha.
Because, like normal, California makes this as complicated as possible, so if anybody takes a look at it, no two people get the same number.
Gotcha.
But the line, the band that we seem to be in, as to what has been cut from this since, I think it's 1980 or something like that. Well, again, it depends on who's doing the calculation. But regardless, the cut over the past anywhere between 10 and 40 years, depending on who you're talking to, is somewhere between, I think the lowest I've seen is about $98 million. to 140.
million. Cut from the budget of making sure this shit doesn't happen.
Yep. Now, again, of note here, this doesn't happen on private land. At least, not to the extent that it does everywhere else, right?
Why is that?
Well, because in California, if a private lumber company has a fire happen on their property, effectively for any reason, California sues the dog shit out of them.
Right.
Now, for reference on this, you can absolutely Google, what the hell's the company? Sierra Pacific Industries, and the fire that happened in, I want to say it's 2015?
Okay.
Might be 2013. California took something like 5,000 acres and $100 and some million from that. Might have even have been 200 million. I think it was $250 million, all said and told.
Wow.
Yeah, they weren't screwing around.
Nope.
And so these companies have more than a little incentive to make sure these fires don't happen.
Right. So on their private property, they make sure that cleanup happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I expected to hear.
Now, by the way, that fire, not even half the size of this fire.
Right.
I'm sorry, roughly half the size of this fire, if I recall correctly. And I might not. However, when it later gets determined that this wasn't the company's fault, and by the way, it was later determined it wasn't the company's fault, it's not like anything went back to them.
Right.
So we have now taken this land that was better off than all the land that is in California's hands and given it to California,
Right.
who is creating worse fires because
They don't take
the
care of it.
only thing that Governor Moonbeam will even discuss when talking about these fires is how climate change is the end of the world.
Right.
And so...
It's all climate change's fault.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. Nothing else has happened. He hasn't stripped millions upon millions upon millions of dollars from the efforts to take care of this.
Right.
He hasn't, in a wide variety of ways, done ridiculous things, like officially ending the drought, because we have had plenty enough water to officially end a drought,
Right.
and then impose ridiculous drought conditions that say you can only have 50 gallons of water per day.
Per house. Yes.
Right. Per person, per house.
Per person, per house. And that's specifically for indoor use only.
Right.
There's going to be a limit for outdoor use, meaning
Right.
lawn care, and it's also going to take into account for leakages. But we don't have that now, so 55 gallons per person per house.
Exactly. Right. This was the thing we needed to be doing. And by the way,
Well, it makes sense.
yeah, only in California.
No, it makes sense in the total method of how we seem to do things. Let's target the lowest denomination of the problem, and say we're solving that to solve the whole problem.
Yeah, well, that
Because
is
like
how it
with
is.
gun violence, get rid of the assault weapons. Let's target after what 5% of the problem, 3% of the problem. Well, here in the water usage, households make up for 5% of the problem.
Yeah.
So we're going to restrict the 5%.
Right.
So
And
that's going to solve everything.
herein is the deal, right? So while we're doing that, as is consistently the case, I mean, we covered what was the Oroville Dam just exploding last year.
the emergency spillway. Yep.
But maintaining that only would have saved us something like 100,000 gallons of water. So,
Okay.
not worth it, clearly.
Clearly.
And every single year, without fail, and look, by all means, look yourself. I'm not going to cover every year's articles on this, but every year, and I think we've talked about it twice now, California opens up every dam in the state
Yeah.
and lowers the water level in all of the various lakes that we have created from these dams. But none of that matters, and certainly we don't need that water now.
Right.
With the biggest fire in California history, not important.
No.
And yes, we did this last year.
Yes, we did this last year. We do it every year in anticipation of rains. You know, we also have to keep our riverways and waterways, with water in them so that the indigenous life can continue to live.
Well, therein is the other thing that has really, really killed us, right? Because I think the last time that we talked about this dam, talked about that, this wouldn't be that big of a problem because we could have dams all over the state, except there's a, one-eyed newt with 3 legs or something that lives everywhere, that
is endangered.
Is endangered, and so if one has ever been seen at any point in the last 50 years, you can't do that. Now, by the way, turns out lakes make great fire breaks.
Yeah. And also for newts, I would think a lake would make a great environment to live.
Yeah, but no. Because reasons.
But you would have to destroy their non-moist habitat that they obviously thrive in.
Exactly.
To create the wet environment that they do actually thrive in.
Yeah. But welcome to California, right? And so, we've been building towards this moment for 50 years with all of these various policies, right? So, no, you can't do brush clearance because there's a mouse that could be on the endangered list that lives vaguely in this vicinity, and it nests in
that stuff.
In stuff.
You're destroying it.
Not even the stuff that we're talking about here, not in the pine needles, but it nests in stuff, and pine needles are stuff.
Yes.
So, no. And every step of the way we have gone, and there are a couple of lawsuits that say, the court went, well, we agreed to X, Y, and Z, so no more clearance because reasons.
Right.
Now, okay, we can make that decision. We can say that we care more about the one-eyed, 3-legged newt than we do about the entire state of California burning. But then the entire state of California burns.
Right.
And to say, well, my 50 years of horrible policy, my destruction of everything to do with what stopped this from happening, is climate change's fault? Well, look, this is exactly what creates climate change skeptics. Because everyone in California has been bitching about this for years.
Right.
Well, not everyone. Right. I mean, Los Angeles doesn't care, but they will when they burn.
Well, I can say they do now. We do have Hollywood stars evacuating homes.
Yeah. There's a Russell Crowe posting video of his house just imploded.
Yeah. And it's all because of mismanagement of the areas and not clearing shit.
Sorry. This didn't used to happen. Now it happens. Now, an interesting thing that I read on this, in relation to this, is that as far as we can tell, there are records of, and again, as far as we can tell, because certainly there wasn't written history at the time, but there are records of people talking to the Native Americans about what California was like before we got here. And they used to do controlled burns in Northern California to keep this shit down.
Yeah.
And, drive game, because let's face it, if you force all the deer into, 4 square miles, then hunting's a lot easier.
It kind of helps, yes.
But the only other thing that we used to do was get out of the way of giant fires and let them just burn down half the state. Well, it's basically what we're doing now.
Right.
Well,
I mean, people would argue that this is, in fact, the natural order to California.
It is.
It is unfortunate that people have decided to put their lodgings within the dangerous swaths.
Well, I mean, there almost isn't any non-dangerous portion.
Right.
Something here is pretty apt to kill you, but it's sunny in San Diego all the time, so that's all that matters.
Right.
Well, look, this isn't going to get any better, right?
Well, not unless we actually do something to clean up dead shit.
Who's in control of all of this?
Well, now it's going to be Newsom.
We think our next hyper-progressive idiot is going to go, turns out maybe we should stop playing the political game and just screaming climate change every time something bad happens, and maybe actually buckle down and take care of the problems in this state.
Well, people keep saying we need to do something about climate change. We agree that things need to be done. Let's start with making sure California doesn't burn down. Let's do something about that.
And that's the end of our show for the day.
That's right. It's taco time.
However, before we go, we'd appreciate it if you shared us around.
You can find us on YouTube,
BitChute,
Facebook,
Twitter,
Patreon,
and Maker Support.
Thanks for stopping by.